We are recording. We are in week 4 of our classes here at Full Sail University. I am Michael Tabb, WGA screenwriter and course director of character creation and development, as well as writing for film and animation during this month. And I'm now going to open the floor to questions from the students who are here and have decided to attend the go-to training for this week. Where are we? We are in the 4th week, the final week of February 2018. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the feedback we're gonna give that's due today.
Yes.
Do we have to put everything in the same document, or we can have our analysis of it in a Word document and then the script notes in the
You should put everything in one document. You want to make things easy for everybody. Now, you are critiquing, which class are you in? Are you in film screenwriting? Are you in the screenwriting class or the character class?
Screenwriting.
Okay, in screenwriting, you should give notes like you did last week, using script notes and keeping in mind how we did that last week for everybody's first draft. The script notes function, for those who don't know yet, is in Final Draft. It is, I can open a Final Draft document right now. Under script notes is under, dun, 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 dun. It's under Insert. So the drop-down menu is Insert. You can go to Script Notes. There's a shortcut also to getting to Script Note. And then you put little flags on the lines. You click on the line where the error is. You click Script Note. And then in the Script Note, you'll label the kind of error that it is, where it asks for the name of the note. And then in the body of the comments, you would explain what was incorrect, what rule it broke and why it was incorrect, and a recommendation for how to fix that error that would be fitting for the proper screenwriting rules, being it formatting or English or whatever the error was. And then there are a couple questions I believe I may have asked in the work group that you should answer for each other, and you'd put that at the back of the script document.
Okay. But it says that we have to make up our own questions.
Oh, great! Even better. Well, then just put your questions at the end of it, because you read it, you're going to want to digest it, and it's going to bring questions to mind for yourself. I mean, you've learned a lot, and you can make up your own questions and put them at the back of put them on the back of the script at the very end.
Yeah, I can't. Somebody's saying that they can't see what you're putting on the screen.
I wasn't putting anything on the screen here. Now I can screen share. Hold on. Here we go. Now you should be able to see my screen. This is an open Final Draft document. And when you click on it, these are the headings up top here along the top of the computer. Under Insert, here's Script Note. See, I've opened an empty Final Draft document, so there's nothing there. But if I wanted to add a script note, I would click that. This comes to be, I can't see it because there we go. I'm moving it so that I can see it. And then here under the name, I would say this is a formatting error. And down here, I would say there is no script here. That's a problem if I'm supposed to be creating a script. I would click Command S to save that note. I could save the screenplay now. Cancel, I'm not saving this. But, so you see how I put the name here and it comes up here, so people automatically know, okay, I have a formatting problem there. Script note. And then, so this is the script note. And then I could say in a script, you need to have a script. And then I would say, I would start with a slug line like this. And then I could offer a slug line, interior professors. I can't read today. I can't type today clearly. Professor's office, Full Sail University day. Now, no period. And, So there you go. Um, and you just tell them what they should do, and then give them an example of how to do it. I'm not going to save this. I'm going to close this. Is that clear to everybody?
So do our slug lines, do they need to have four pieces to it or three?
What would be the fourth piece?
Well, like yours, it says professor's office at Full Sail University. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, do we need to include like where it's if it's not in a building, do we need to include
For
like
exteriors, you only need one location. For interiors, you will probably need a macro and a micro location. One saying the room that you're in, and then one saying basically the building you're in. So outdoors, you could say we are in winter. Winter. You even on the outside, you might say Main Street, Winter Park, or you might just say Park. You know,
so like if my character's in a car, like would I need to put like maybe if they're at a location but in the car kind of it's the interior car, this location, day.
yeah, you would if you're going to be seeing the location around them, then you would put it. You would do something like this. Okay, so I could do.
Well, it's not like, if you want it to have like an action going on, like a sequence inside of the car, like they're just sitting in the car or something like that,
The
like a meeting or something.
sits in the parking lot. Okay. See, I see now that I see that when I type it out, I would put Full Sail University parking lot, and that would be in all caps. And then I'd Civic in a sits as Joe and Ann. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, uh, um, argue in an animated fashion. And I may change that. I may change that later. And then I would go interior car day, uh, and then um, Joe spills his coffee with a wild gesture. Why am I putting this in the note, not in the script? I have no idea. I just realized that. I'm like, wait a minute. Control X, Control V. There we go. See, and now if I type this in the wrong place, I go to Format, change this element to a scene heading, and it automatically capitalizes everything. This is also a scene heading, but it's going to transfer it in that way, so I'm going to go down and change this to a scene heading as well. This says it's general, which is not good. We don't use generals really. There's a spelling mistake, so I will switch that. Gesture. There you go. Uh, you see what I mean? Because we don't. Just so you guys understand, general is sometimes used when you are doing a what's it called? When you're doing a super or something, or you're writing about something that's written on something else. You know. Uh, but this is how I would do it, and then I would ask myself uh, for a situation like this because this puts you in the location. This tells you where the action is taking place, and then you'd have the scene in the car. Does that make sense? Hello, Mary.
Yes.
Does this work for you? Do
Yes.
you have any questions about that?
Well, I was just kind of wondering if like we were doing a scene, like because would that be considered two scenes?
You're right. It is two locations. So I would just
Just kind of stick with.
yeah, and I boom.
Okay.
Interior car Full Sail University parking lot. Maybe do that.
Okay.
I'm deciding if I would like that. Interior Full Sail University parking lot. Joe's car. Yeah, it's not great. I would have done it the other way, but I see what you mean because we're limiting it to one scene. You can just put interior. I mean, does it matter? Here's the thing: does it matter where they're parked? Does it play any role in the scene?
No, because they would have been at like the same, like at where they were at already. Just it would have been just in
Now,
the car.
then I would do something like this. But and then I'm going to ask you another question that's going to be that's tough, and that is that do you think the car is really the best place to set this scene? Is it the most symbolic for what you're talking about? Are they in a are they questioning whether they should run away somewhere, and that's why you have them in a car? Because putting people in a car, unless it's is it a chase scene?
No.
Okay, so the question is whether the car gives you the most emotional visual bang for your buck for the story you're trying to tell, as well as subtextually. What's the scene about?
Um. It.
Picking the right location for a scene is very important. People don't give that enough thought. People go, "Oh, well, this would take place between this and his," which would probably mean that they would be put here. But ask yourself if they should be put there, and if there's a better location for it. So, what's the scene about?
I was using my antagonist, and he was basically meeting with um his liaison for doing a proposal with another company. And like he had just like the liaison had just got back, and so he kind of had sent him to go do it, and he comes back and he just kind of was, I had him meeting him at the car because the antagonist is kind of like really like, this isn't what I asked you to do, you need to take care of this, like with this character. Just kind of, I kind of put in the car, so I didn't feel like I wanted to like more stuff there,
Right.
but I mean, I
Well,
guess I
well,
could put it into
here's a thought.
dialogue.
Is this guy a shady businessman?
Yes ish.
Okay, so then what you should do is you have uh, in a parking garage Joe's car. I would put it parking garage, and then I would and then what I would do is I'd have Joe behind the wheel, sits in the parked car behind the wheel, sweating.
Well, yeah, because it's more like
But then you have the
chauffeured
car pull
vehicle,
up,
so they're like,
blinding lights. Is this what's the genre? Is this drama? Is it thriller? Is it crime?
mine was science fiction.
Science fiction. Hmm. Parked car doesn't scream science fiction to me, but where is it science fiction in modern day or is it in the future?
Future.
Okay, so hmm, I would think about are they in flying cars? Are where are they meeting? Are they meeting in a? It just it raises a lot of other questions. See, if this were a thriller, I'd say all of a sudden a car with bright headlights pulls up behind him, and then two silhouettes he sees from the car get out of that car, and one person gets in the front passenger seat next to him, and the other guy who seems like muscle gets into the back seat right behind the protagonist. So immediately it's threatening because this guy could pull a gun behind his head and he wouldn't know it. It adds that looming quality and have him sit behind him. And then, you know, by bringing this guy into the car with them, saying, we have a problem, he can say it in the nicest of ways now because he has a guy right behind him who's intimidating and being all the intimidation without having to use the words to be intimidating. So it provides the subtext for the scene. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I don't know if that helps at all. But if you're doing it in a regular parking lot, I would pick a parking garage to keep it a little more on edge, because it sounds like when you're dealing with shady businesses and the future, uh, you know,
I didn't know if I needed to, like, in my head I kind of like they're gonna be in the parking garage because I didn't feel like the scene should be taking place at night, but someplace that would still kind of be dark. Like in my mind, like it's not the most open area is kind of what I had in mind for it, but I didn't know if I should like include all of that in a slug line. Well, at least
well,
like,
you
if,
can
if
set it
they're
in
in
the
the
back
car,
room.
the location it is.
Yeah, you need to include enough mood in the scene description, but I would never. Here's what I do when I'm describing mood in a scene description. You start with the characters and the action, and you let the action show the audience through how you're describing how they are in that environment and what they're doing. Let that tell you the environment. So you can say he sweats. He wipes. He uses a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his brow, and discards it in the dark car in a lightless parking structure. You know. So you're taking the action and you're making it, and then all of a sudden bright lights illuminate behind him. It's the headlights of another car, kind of thing, uh, blinding him in the rearview mirror. So basically you're putting him in discomfort, you're blinding him, sensory deprivation, and then illumination. You can play with things like that because it shows drama. It shows, you know, um, when somebody takes away his ability to see because all of a sudden there's a blinding lights coming in and in the rear view mirror. uh, you know that sets the mood, and it tells you it was darker before and now it's, you know what I mean. You can use it. You can definitely just make sure that you're using it in a way that forwards story. The key is that the surroundings as you describe them should kind of promote the conflict and the drama and and what's going on between the characters that makes it edgier, that makes it that creates the situation. You want to stick to story and character only. So if it's, as long as it serves the story to create that scarier situation, describe it and make sure it's clear, because the genre is how you're telling the story.
Okay.
And it could be here in a science fiction. You know, you could set this in a dark nightclub, and the bad guy has a room in the back. That nobody's allowed in. That there are people at the door. I mean, that's a little cliche. I kind of don't like it, but you can come up with something that is, you know, something that maybe feels a little bit more futuristic or more science fictiony, that can give it that genre tone that you're looking for while you're in the location, if you see a place for it.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yes.
Did you have any other questions? I'm going to turn off my screen because we don't need that anymore. Did you have any other questions? I will take that as a no. Hold on, I just realized there's some chat stuff going on here in the chat window. For those of you listening to the recording, I see a chat window on my GoToTraining control panel, but you do not in the recording. It doesn't show on the recording that we do at GoToTraining. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. So, should our line be set up like this? No. uh, Day would go at the very end of the slug line. I had an example on the screen. It's interior or exterior, ext or int period, the macro location, then the micro location. So Butter's condo, it would be not Butter condo. Her name, the character's name in her script is Butter. So it would be Butter's condo. You'd have to have apostrophe and an S at the end of Butter condo, and then you'd put a comma or a dash, and then you would put bedroom. Now, if you want to specify if it's the master bedroom or Butter's bedroom or whatever, you can do that, and then you can use a dash between those two locations, or you can use a comma. I like the comma, but that's just me. It doesn't matter. And then you put another dash at the end of that, and you put day or night. So yes, it's the second version. There you go. It's the second version, but still there's the English error of butter. It's not butter condo. It's Butter's condo. All right. Does anybody else have any questions that you would like to ask me at this time? All right. So one of the things I'd like to go over is possibly talking about some of the tricks and trades. Since both classes, one of the classes is writing their first dramatic or comedic scene, and the other one is writing their first contained script, not an episodic story that doesn't necessarily have to have a complete ending on it. So I am going to open this file for myself. I have a cheat sheet I use in the other class, and I give it to all the students in my screenwriting class. And I'm going to go over some things that you want to make sure that you do. One, if you are having any scenes located in a particular type of business, make sure you're using the right terminology for that business. Because the worst thing you can do is have a scene in a hospital and you're not using any medical jargon at all. It sounds like the writer doesn't know what they're doing, so you want to make sure that you don't want to overburden it with a bunch of research because then it looks like you're just trying to show people what you learned. So it's about layering in just one thing that kind of says, okay, you knew what you were talking about as a writer. A person in that profession can understand what you're saying, and it doesn't throw off the mood or anything. Two, you do want to make sure, and I just talked about it with Ms. Miner's question, about making sure you include tone/genre throughout all your scenes, as best you can. Now, not everything has to be hardcore genre, but it's a good idea if you want a script to be sold as science fiction that you never know when somebody cuts a trailer of your movie and what the preview is going to look like, that you want to make sure kind of the scenes all feel like you're holding to that genre so that they can sell the genre. Because genre is how stories are sold to the public. Another thing you want to make sure is that every location of every scene you use, if you can, make the location count. It should represent something, whether a subtext or the actual thing that's happening, that it's fitting for the genre. And get rid of cliches from your stories. That's another thing that's important. If you've seen it that way a million times, which is why I said, I don't see a futuristic movie being set kind of in a modern, what to me felt like a modern day kind of parking structure scene. I would be looking for ways to see if, I mean, yes, the set decorator's job is to kind of give it a visual representation of what you're doing, but think about it and see if there's something you could do with it that makes it feel more sci-fi. And that's why I said I had the idea for the nightclub in the back room, but that felt cliche. So I said, you know what? I wouldn't set it there. You're going to come up with ideas for things, and don't just take the first idea that comes to mind. Think about it. Give yourself a bunch of options, and then choose the best one. People don't really use fade in and fade out anymore in movies. A lot of the scripts are not using it. Some people who've been doing it for a while or are trained in institutions that are not keeping up with the times may not realize this, but kind of fade in and fade out is kind of going away the way 5 years ago the words cut to kind of started to leave scripts because of the fact that quite frankly, of course, the movie's going to fade in on something and it ends by fading out on something. And of course, every scene in the movie is going to cut to another scene because everything cuts to another thing. So it's the people are realizing those are just redundant descriptions. And though it was nice to separate things, when you realize it's redundant and you only have so many pages, people are becoming more efficient with their writing in screenplays. So we don't use a lot of transitions anymore, and we don't use much fade in and fade out anymore. Though in television, they still do use it. Comic books and graphic novels isn't really a concern for this class. Uh, the slug lines, we talked about that and how they need to be done. Um, then let's go on to if you're doing a science fiction film and it takes place off world, you don't need day or night in space. So you would leave off that last part. You would just put space, outer space, or whatever. Um, that's important. Now, one of the biggest errors I see in people's action lines when they are writing action lines in a scene on what's going on, people often forget that you, everything that you see happen on screen is happening in the present tense. So nothing should be written in the scene descriptions in passive tense. It should all be active present tense. And because it's only what you can see, what we hear is the dialogue and sound effects. So dialogue would go in dialogue, and sound effects you can mention them in the scene descriptions, but everything else in the actual scene action lines needs to be 100% visual. So you can't inform audiences of I'm going to turn off that mail. Quit that. All right, so it doesn't do that anymore. You can't put backstory in descriptions because the audience is not going to get that information. If you want to tell backstory visually, you can have somebody walk into somebody's office and see a picture on the wall of them in military gear in some jungle somewhere with their army buddies. That tells you this guy was a soldier. If you want to give information, you have to show it. You can't tell it. Everything has to be shown. You can't explain anything in scene descriptions. You can't give us an as if or other similes or alliterations. Every image must speak for itself, so you must write it in a way that it is self evident because you're not able to give the audience watching the film that simile or alliteration to explain it to them. So you have to explain exactly what you see. Um, you don't make statements, explanations, give information in action lines. You can't do it. You just have to. It's what we can see. You don't tell people. You don't say, this guy this is his job in this company. If you can't tell a CEO John whatever walks down the hall because we don't know he is a CEO just by looking at him. You can describe him as stiff. You can describe his age, his style. You can describe how crisp he is, what he looks like, his physical features, but don't tell us what he is. If you want the audience to know, because you can only give information the way an audience watching the movie will receive it. So, if he's a CEO, you're going to need to mention that in actual dialogue. Or in his office, when they walk to the office, on the door it says CEO or Chief Executive Officer, and then their name. So that if you want to make it visual, that's fine, but you have to physically show it. Or if you want to give them information by not showing it, which I don't recommend, but that would have to go in dialogue. Internal feelings or emotions. You don't tell us what's going on inside because we don't see it on the outside. What we see on the outside are actions. You don't say someone is sad. You would say someone is crying, or they cry because you wouldn't want to use passive tense. So you describe what the emotion is making them do because that's the physical externalization of what is going on inside. That's what people see. You can't explain intentions, hopes, memories, uh, the writer's characters or thoughts. You can't leap to conclusions for the reader, like saying, everybody is feeling this. You can't tell us what everybody's feeling. You can say, a gunshot goes off. everybody scatters in all directions screaming. Therefore, we don't need to know. You don't need to say pandemonium and chaos. You're showing pandemonium and chaos, things like that. So that's important. So the action lines, keep it to the visuals and make sure it's conveying what we can see and all the information you want to show. Another big one is you be careful of how you use the word to, to, in an action line, because usually that is a threshold to offering the audience's the actor's intention, and you're not allowed to give intention in the action lines. You can only say what they do. So you can't say they run down the hall to escape the bad guy. You can't do that. You can't tell us why they're doing it. They run down the hall. They saw the bad guy. He shot at them, and they ran. We understand. You don't need to make the conclusion as to what they are doing and why, because you need to show it, and the audience needs to come to their own conclusions that they are running from the guy with the gun. You don't get to explain why they're doing it. You show them. And the best way to do that is, if you have a to in your script in the action line, see if you can replace it with the word and. And if you can, then get rid of the to and replace it with and, so it's clear that you're not, because some things can be seen, because some things will work better with the and it makes it clear it's a physical action as opposed to people thinking you're trying to tell them what to think. Students often, so you don't tell people in the action lines or in the character descriptions what their relationship is to everybody. You can't say his brother or his sister, and then when you go on in the script, you wouldn't say his brother walks into the room. No, once you name a character, you use that name in the scene description all the time. Don't change it, because the audience isn't going to be remembering brother, sister, this, that. It's a character and the name, and they should know what the character's relationship is to the characters. Again, that is a form of drawing a conclusion for the audience. Oh, that's his brother walking in. Well, when you say the name, they should draw the conclusion that that's the brother, if you've set it up properly. Okay, so that was important. Now, with dialogue parentheticals, there are only 3 reasons to use them. 1, if the character is speaking to someone other than the last person who spoke, so that we know that the dialogue is shifting from one person to another. That tells the actor, because automatically when people are in a room speaking, if a character speaks and then another character speaks, the reader will read it as if that person is replying to the person who just spoke to them. It's an automatic reaction. So if it's being redirected to someone else, you should let them know. 2, to mention what language the line is being spoken, it will be spoken in during production. So you can say, in Spanish with subtitles, but you're still going to write all your dialogue in English, because your readers speak English. And then 3 is a crucial piece of information without which the actor would not understand a line. For example, sometimes it's necessary to say when a character is being sarcastic, because the meaning of the line is the opposite of what the character is saying, and the reader of the part may not understand that unless you tell them. That's it. Those are the only 3 reasons you ever need to use a dialogue parenthetical, and 9 out of 10 scripts honestly don't need them at all. So just be aware of that. The dialogue parenthetical is not one of those things you should abuse. 9 times out of 10, a script is almost 100% slug lines, action lines, and dialogue, and that's it. Those are the only 3 things you need to tell a story. So your formatting is a lot simpler than you may originally think it is when you get into Final Draft and when you look at people's scripts. People add a bunch of things they don't necessarily need, and you don't need to do that. What else? Character introductions. Remember, don't forget that every time a new character comes into your scene or a script, you have to give the first time you mention their name should be in all caps. Directly after the name, you can put a comma, or you can put it in parentheses or surrounded by commas, one or the other, not both. You put their age right next to it. You always go name and age, nothing else between them. And then after that, you can go into a description of the character and make sure any description you use of the character is not only back in lowercase, but that you're telling us something about the character that allows us to see them as unique from the other characters in the story. You wouldn't say dark hair and average height, average build, because you've basically told us absolutely nothing. So you're basically saying this could be anybody. So whatever descriptions you give us a sense that this is an individual character. You don't have to go cliche like an eye patch and scars all over his face just to make him stand out. It should be suited to the character, but make sure that when you convey what the character is, that you give them some sense of uniqueness that allows us to say, okay, that's how we can identify. Like this person walks with astounding posture and has every hair in place. That tells us something about how this person presents themselves. So that later, if they're going to lose their stuff and they're going to get really upset and they're going to go into a depression or spiral or lose their mind, later when the hair starts getting crazy and he's no longer crisp and clean, you're showing the change in the character. You're playing with the expectation of what you've shown us this character is, and then you can work with that throughout the story if they go through a change. Remember, before you turn in any script or any scene, to run Format Assistant. That is crucial. Format Assistant will catch it if you start a line with a blank space, if you skip lines between dialogue or anything, if there's blank lines in there, that just looks sloppy to readers, and you want to make sure that your scripts read the most professional and elegant as anybody's. So you want to just make sure that you don't have those kind of basic formatting errors, and Format Assistant catches blanks before lines of dialogue. If you accidentally hit return where you're not supposed to, you can back it up and make sure everything is aligned. Sometimes it'll offer to fix it for you. Just click fix and let it, and you'll see what that does. And if it looks wrong to you, then go down and look at the bottom. You see where I showed you before, where the general was, where you could switch it to slug line or scene heading or action line or whatever. You can switch it to what it needs to be. You highlight the line and you can switch it. A lot of people used to use the word beat a lot, but it's important that most people don't really understand how to use the word beat. The word beat means a piece of information has been introduced that literally changes what another character is going through, thinking, and will go after in the rest of the scene. It is a major shift in scene because of information received. Now, it can be that somebody draws a gun. That's a major shift and changes how people are going to go about things. It can be a new piece of information revealed through dialogue, or revealed through action. That somebody walks in through the room and goes, "Hey, look, I just need to talk to you about that thing earlier today. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to." And then the door opens wider, and then he realizes the person he went to see behind him is his girlfriend in bed. Beat. And so this guy's sleeping with his girlfriend. So now that's going to change how he feels and whether he's sorry. Also, another thing though, limit your character's apologies or your pleases and your thank yous. I know it's good manners; it's the way we were taught, but we are capturing really dramatic moments in story. That's what every scene needs: conflict. And with conflict, we don't need little pleasantries. We want to get to the guts and explore the issue. I save pleases, thank yous, and apologies for and I love yous, the confessions of love, for the very end of the movie after the climax, because the tension is out. We can let everything on the table. People can make amends because we're now releasing the tension and letting people go back into their everyday lives. So that's part of the pleasantries. What else do you want to know? Do you want to ask about? We don't use italics or bold in scripts, period. If you underline some text, remember that should be exceptionally rare and only if it's crucial. What else? Looking through here, seeing. Oh, we don't use numbers, written out numbers, unless you're giving an age for a character. You're superimposing titles of a date and year, or we're looking at the time on a digital clock. Other than that, you're supposed to spell out numbers. in all dialogue, because people need to know how they're saying it, because there are many ways to say a number. Like, for example, a time. You'd say I'm going to meet you at 2:30, or somebody could say I meet you at half past. I'll meet you at 2:30. You know, they want to know the exact words they're going to say, so you need to spell out everything in dialogue. Um, and that goes for everything. Um, don't forget the seven sins. Look over the seven deadly dialogue sins from the book, the textbook of the class, that are really important. Whether it's exposition, exaggeration, derivative, or cliche dialogue. Everyday pleasantries, like I talked about, hello, how are you, or sitting there and ordering from a menu. Unnecessary repetition or unnecessary repetition. Joke. Okay. No room for subtext, which is on the nose dialogue, and unoriginal speeches that they're not saying anything we haven't heard or don't already know. That kind of thing. Those are the major things you don't want to include in dialogue. If you're using curse words at all, personally, I don't use them much, because sometimes an actor is going to add them anyway. And if I do use them, I save it for in a feature length script. I will curse at the most 3 times, and because those words do have an impact, and there's some of the very few words that still have an impact when people hear them spoken out loud. And it may not. Different people feel differently, but for a lot of people, they do still have power. So I save using that kind of a word in an R-rated movie. I save it for the most important, impactful moment in which one could use that word. Therefore, give that word. You only use that word in a situation that really says this is the biggest of all moments in the story up until this point in the story.
Like the ending of Alien, the first one,
Yes.
when she charges at the alien. Yeah, that's like I forgot the exact quote, but it makes it more. It makes it important because you can see how exhausted and upset she is, all the stuff that she
That's
has
right.
gone through. But you also know that even if she kills the alien now, she might die anyway. So
Yep.
it's like, and so you can feel the tenseness of her cursing.
That's right. And I don't know if you remember this line, but there's this line from Alien also: "Get away from her, you bitch," because that's at the end of Aliens, the sequel, I think. But it's that boom, because when it gets to that point, we've been waiting for the drama has been constantly going, and conflict must be in every scene. It doesn't have to be direct conflict; it can be indirect conflict, which is two people are trying to do the same thing but don't agree on how to do it. But at but when you're reaching the big final conflict moments, if and only if you want to use a curse word, okay, that's where you use it. That's where you spend that ammo. Don't spend it willy nilly, because then it means nothing when they say it in the end. Does that make sense? I'll take that as a yes. Another thing is, be careful with voiceovers and flashbacks. Uh, People don't realize there's all these reasons to have them, but 9 times out of 10 they're expositional, which is not what we want in dialogue. When the truth is that you have to remember 2 things, and that is there are only reasons to have something in a scene. And again, it's to forward the story or to reveal something deep about the character. Voiceover, the whole reason to really use voiceover is it because it reveals the character whose voice is going, the voice of the character inside their head that's not being expressed out loud. So it needs to be revealing something deeply personal about how that character thinks and is. That would be the only reason to use voiceover. Other than that, you don't need it. And as far as flashbacks and showing things, literally, you never use a flashback unless you literally cannot move forward in the story without it. Because literally, the story can't progress without that happening. But even then, you have to be careful, because often when you flash back to anything, you'll realize that the stakes are gone because we know the character, whatever that flashback is to, we know the character made it to this moment in time, so we know they're okay. They lived. So literally, the high stakes that you can have in a script of somebody, what's going to happen next, all goes out the window because you lose all that energy and tension when you go back in time because we already know they survive it. And people don't realize that there's something that happens underneath. And that's why it's important. It's also one of the reasons why a lot of great filmmakers have done it, where they show the protagonist dead at the beginning of the movie, like they've already died, and they tell you they're going to die, and then at the end of the movie they die. I personally don't like doing that because, as somebody watching the film, I find myself not engaging or cheering or believing they can win or caring because I won't emotionally invest in a character I already know is doomed. Now, I know in historical stories that person will have died eventually somehow, but if I know that they, at the end, at the beginning of Sunset Boulevard, at the beginning of Citizen Kane, at the beginning of American Beauty, they start those historically Oscar winning best movies by telling you this character's dead. And then the whole movie, gets you there. But I find that I was emotionally less engaged by those movies because I knew the character was dying, and it was hard for me to invest in their success if I know how it ends, and it ends that way. So you may not feel that way, but that's just something that I personally feel, and I thought I'd share it with you in case you realize you feel that way too when you tell stories. You can do it if you want to. That's your choice. Also, be careful of using speed bumps in your action lines. Speed bumps are when you're writing an action that actually doesn't affect the scene. When somebody takes a sip of coffee or a drag off of a cigarette, does not need to be an action line in your script. The thing is you want to break up dialogue with action from time to time because we're working in a visual medium, but that action needs to have meaning. If it doesn't mean anything to the scene, then really you're not adding action, you're just adding direction or staging. And that's not important. If you want to keep a story visual, you want to make sure that the information that the audience is needing to continue with the conflict is visual, not just what they're doing happenstance or situational. That's why sitting in coffee shops is not considered, a great location for a scene between characters because all they're doing is sitting there and drinking coffee. Now you can set something there, but then if somebody flips the table or somebody throws the drink in somebody's face, you want to be able to use the setting. Or if somebody wants to embarrasses them, stands up and makes a scene, then all of a sudden the location becomes of use. But just sitting there over coffee, having a conversation and talking about things, that's not an exciting way to reveal information. We want to keep things visual, and the visuals need to do things that forward the conflict or reveal something deeply personal about character or do not include it. That is a big one because a lot of people, one of the biggest things I see in amateur writers who didn't get an education are actions that don't have um, that kind of clarity and that kind of succinct and um, necessary nature to the scene. The action needs to be necessary. If it's not necessary to forward the scene to have the next beat, like for example, if you have an action in a scene and then the next line doesn't that somebody says doesn't change at all after that action line based on that action that happened, you don't need the action unless it's something that's you're setting up, like somebody pulls their gun out under the table, because it may not change their action, but it changes how the audience is going to perceive that next moment because all of a sudden that other person is in mortal danger. But it has to have an effect on the conflict, or don't use it. Those are some of the things I want to talk about and just reiterate to help you make your scripts better. Have fun writing your stories. Write what you love. Write what's important to you. Write what's important to what you want to say to the world, um, and love it. This isn't just an assignment. This is your opportunity to explore the things you want to say to the world in a way that people are going to listen to you. We all want to make a difference in this world, I think. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we become writers is because we have something to say. And this is your chance to do it. And I'm just trying to teach you the most effective way of keeping people's attention and doing it dramatically so that you can get their attention and so that they are engaged and so that they are listening. And that's what these tricks teach you. Be careful of your English. Make sure that, there's a comma time video. I called it comma time at the beginning of the class, and it explains that watch out for comma splices are the biggest error people make in grammar in English mechanics. It's when you combine two independent clauses or sentences with a comma instead of a period or a semicolon. Also, know the difference between a list and a compound sentence. Know how to use commas for each of those, and and those are the things I kind of wanted to go over. Does anybody have any questions on those things I mentioned? Did it bring any questions to your mind? Please feel free to speak up. Nobody has questions. I have rambled into silence. Okay, so I guess that's it for today. Remember, you're not directors. You don't need to tell people necessarily how to act their lines. The lines and the action should show them what they're doing, and let them decide. Let the actors decide how they feel about that and how they should be feeling. Lastly, I do want to say there are three great editing tricks I want to remind you. One, enter late and leave early. Ask yourself, what is the latest you can enter the scene? You can write out the whole scene or whatever, but then you may want to cut out when the people enter, and you would skip past any kind of greeting they'd have and cut into the middle of the scene where the scene actually gets interesting, and see if you don't need any of that. Ask yourself at the beginning of every scene, how much of what's at the beginning do I really need? And then at the end, when has this scene reached its climactic moment? And how much do I need after this? So can get rid of some of the ends. You can get rid of some of the exits. If somebody's going to exit and slam the door and act like a child, and that's a choice, then obviously that's something. But but usually you don't need to go all the way to the end of the scene. You show where the conflict is, what it's building to, and then you get out just at the climax or just after it. Two is don't use those words that you don't need. Things like still, somebody starts to or begins to do something, again, continues to, often, and then, now. All those words are explained that you don't need them. You don't need up, down, over, or back. Somebody sits down. If somebody sits, we know they're sitting down. If somebody stands up, we know when they stand, they're standing up. You don't need those words. If somebody is going to go back to their room, they go to their room. We know they're going back if that's where they came from. So we get rid of words we don't need. Every action starts with something, so you don't need to say they start something. You don't say what somebody's nearly doing or attempting to do or almost doing or tries to do. What do they actually do? We never write in the description what somebody is not doing. We show what is happening, what is the moment, not what's not the moment. So, and lastly, avoid adverbs. Words ending in ly. 9 times out of 10, when somebody has an adverb in there, it's because they didn't find the right verb. And if you'd found the right proper verb for what you actually meant, you wouldn't need the descriptor in front of the verb to give it a quality that you were trying to get to with your verb, but didn't take the time to figure out. So find the right verbs for things, and you'll find you won't need adverbs. And keep your action lines to 3 lines each. You can have several action lines back to back, but break them up so that it's easier to read and people can tear through the script faster when they read. So it keeps it in flow. If you wonder where to break up your paragraphs, ask yourself, hey, where would the director move the camera during this series of action? Would the camera move after this action or after this action? And that can kind of help guide you as to where to break things up. All right, I'm just talking and talking and talking. One last great editing one, and that is that if you have one word hanging over, taking up a whole line of space in your script, that's what David Trottier calls orphans. I've heard them called widows. I call them danglers. It doesn't matter. You have a single word taking up a whole line of your script. Ask yourself if there's any way of rewording it or cutting a word or something that brings that up a line. Don't waste the space on the page if you don't need it. If you don't need that extra line to be taken by a single word, it helps the flow. It helps it read faster and move quicker if you find more efficient ways of phrasing things. And it's just a way to inspire yourself to be more succinct in what you've written. All right, now I'm done talking about this stuff. Does anybody have any questions? I'll ask one last time before we end. All right. I see you're all off doing other things anyway, because it says you're all not clicked on this. So, well, I hope you got something out of it. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you for coming out, and have a lovely day.